Ever wonder how far someone would go for love? I learned there's no limit, not even close. That lesson cost me my childhood, but it's a story worth telling. Hey there, I'm Grandma Ellie, 73 years young, and I've got a tale that's been tucked in my heart for over 5 decades. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let me take you back to where it all began. Picture a sleepy little town called Springvale, nestled in the rolling hills of rural Kentucky. It's the kind of place where everybody knows your name, and secrets don't stay secret for long. Before I dive in, do me a favour, drop a comment below and tell me where you're reading this from. Are you in Kentucky, sipping sweet tea on a porch, or somewhere across this big old country? Oh, and if you're feeling kind, give this a like and follow along, because our little storytelling family is growing fast and you're officially part of it. Hit that notification bell too. Trust me, stories like mine don't come around every day. Now, let's get to the heart of it. My parents. My dad, James, was a salt-of-the-earth guy. He spent his days elbow deep in engine grease at a small auto shop in downtown Springvale. His hands were always stained, but his heart, pure as a mountain stream. You'd look at him and think, that's a good man. And he was. But he had one flaw that turned out to be a slow-burning disaster. He loved too much. I'm not kidding when I say too much. His love for my mum, Evelyn, was the kind that hurt to watch, like seeing someone pour their whole soul into a fire that just keeps burning them. Mum was a knockout back in the day, tall, with jet-black hair that caught the sunlight like polished obsidian and green eyes that sparkled like emeralds. Her beauty wasn't just pretty, it was the kind that made you feel small, like you didn't quite belong in her orbit. She'd rolled into Springvale from an even tinier town in Tennessee, carrying nothing but a beat-up suitcase and a past nobody could pin down. Small-town gossip travels faster than a summer storm. Folks whispered that Evelyn had been married before, that she'd run off from something, or someone. They said she'd done things that'd make a preacher blush, but Dad, he didn't care about the rumours. Those green eyes had him hooked, and that was that. I came along just 3 months after their wedding. Yep, do the math. Growing up, I watched Dad bend over backward for her day after day. When I say bend, I mean break. Evelyn snapped her fingers, and he jumped. She complained, he apologised, even when he'd done nothing wrong. It was like watching a loyal dog chase a bone he'd never catch. I remember when I was about 8, she set her sights on a dress in a fancy Louisville boutique, priced way above Dad's paycheck. I saw him count the coins in his old coffee tin, sigh like the weight of the world was on him, and borrow money from his boss to buy it. When he brought it home, Evelyn barely glanced at it. "Huh," she said, tossing it aside. "I thought it'd be nicer." Dad just stood there, forcing a smile, his heart cracking like dry earth. The worst part? He thought he deserved it. He truly believed a woman like Evelyn was doing him a favour by sticking around, and she knew it. Oh, she knew it. Evelyn had a sharp, dangerous kind of smarts. She could zero in on exactly what made Dad feel small, like a kid who'd spilled milk at the grown-ups' table. After a long day at the shop, she'd sigh and say, "James, you don't even see how much I give up staying in this nowhere town for you." If he tried to show her affection, she'd roll her eyes and mutter, "You're so simple, aren't you? You don't get what life's about." And Dad, he'd just nod, swallowing her words like bitter medicine. I was a kid, but the anger inside me burned hot. I wanted to grab him, shake him and yell, "Why do you let her do this?" But back then, kids didn't butt into grown-up matters. So I watched him shrink, thinner, more stooped, like a tree losing its leaves in a never-ending winter. The crueler she got, the tighter he held on, as if her sharpness proved he wasn't worthy of better. It was a twisted dance I didn't fully understand until it was too late. Evelyn didn't lift a finger around the house. She'd lounge on the porch, brushing her hair and griping about the heat, while I, barely tall enough to reach the stove, cooked, cleaned and scrubbed. By 12, I started catching whispers from the neighbours. They'd lower their voices when they passed our house, but I heard. They said Evelyn got mysterious letters she hid from Dad. They said she'd slip out in the afternoons and come back with new trinkets, a lipstick, a comb, even a necklace once. Nobody knew where they came from. Dad either didn't notice or chose not to. His love blinded him, like staring into the sun until the world goes dark. I started to feel a different kind of fear, not of punishment, but of something heavier. It was like living in a house perched on a fault line, knowing the ground could split open any second. Evelyn could twist Dad around her finger, and he'd do anything to keep her. I was 14, caught in the middle, waiting for the quake I knew was coming. Then, in the summer of 1969, everything shifted. It was a hot, sticky July, the kind where the air feels like a wet blanket. The world was buzzing with talk of the moon landing, but in our house, something else was brewing. Evelyn started getting sick. A dry cough turned into gasping breaths, then exhaustion so deep she could barely stand. Her skin took on a sickly yellow hue. The local doc in Springvale was stumped, so Dad drained every penny he had to get her to a hospital in Louisville. The diagnosis hit like a thunderclap: lung cancer, advanced stage. Dad crumpled right there in the hospital hallway, sobbing like a little boy who'd lost everything. I'd never seen a grown man break like that. Evelyn, she just stared at the doctor, her green eyes sharp, calculating, like she was already planning her next move. The doctor gave her 6 months, tops, and said all they could do was manage the pain. On the rattling bus ride back to Springvale, Evelyn took Dad's hand and whispered, "James, now you'll show me how much you really love me." I was right behind them, straining to hear. Dad squeezed her hand and said, "Anything, Evelyn, anything." In the months that followed, she became a queen, a fading, ruthless queen. Dad quit showing up at the shop to tend to her every need. He took leave, then lost his job, but he didn't care. He was at her beck and call, sleeping on the floor by her bed, bathing her, brushing her thinning hair. Then came the tests, Evelyn's proofs of his love. At first they were small, but they grew darker, crueler. She made him burn old family photos, pictures of his late parents, his childhood. He hesitated, but the backyard fire burned them all. Once she demanded he sell his wedding ring to buy some miracle medicine from a newspaper ad. He did, only to find out it was snake oil. Evelyn laughed, like it was all a game. I couldn't stand it. One night I begged him to stop, to see what she was doing. His eyes were hollow, desperate. "Ellie," he said, "when the person you love is dying, you do anything to prove your love is real. Anything." That word, anything, hung in the air like a storm cloud. Evelyn got weaker, but her grip on him tightened. She started saying eerie things, like she'd watch him from the afterlife to see if his love was true. She hinted at a final test, something to prove he wasn't like the other men she'd known. My stomach churned every time I heard her. I was 16, trapped in a house where love felt like a noose, waiting for the final tug. The air in our house felt thick, like the calm before a storm you know will tear everything apart. Mum's sickness had stripped her body to a frail shadow, but those green eyes of hers still burned with a fire that didn't belong in someone so close to death. By spring of 1970, Evelyn could barely lift her head from the pillow. Yet something in her gaze had shifted when she looked at me. Not the usual cold dismissal, but a strange, calculating curiosity, like she was sizing me up for some twisted plan. I was 17, starting to carry myself like a woman, and I could feel her eyes tracing me, weighing me, plotting something I couldn't name. One night I jolted awake to her whispering Dad's name, James, with a sharp urgency that pulled me out of bed. It was around 2 a.m, and I crept to their bedroom door, peering through the crack. Evelyn was propped up on her elbows, her gaze locked on Dad, who was curled up on the floor beside her bed. Her lips curled into a smile that sent ice down my spine. Not a smile of love, but one that screamed trouble, like a predator spotting its prey. "James," she hissed softly, "wake up. It's time." Dad startled awake, as he always did when she called, his voice groggy but desperate to please. "What's wrong, honey? You in pain? Need your meds?" "No," she said, her voice steady, almost commanding. "No meds. I need to talk. Sit here." She patted the bed. Dad sat, his hands trembling. Whether from exhaustion or fear, I couldn't tell. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it through the door. "James," she started, her tone heavy, "you know I'm dying soon." Dad shook his head, his voice cracking. "Don't say that, Evelyn. The doctors could be wrong. There might be a new treatment." "Stop it!" she snapped, sharper than her frail body should have allowed. Then she softened, like flipping a switch. "I'm sorry, love, but I need to say this while I've still got the strength." Dad nodded, his eyes already glistening with tears. "You've spent our whole marriage telling me you love me," she went on, "that you'd do anything for me. You remember that, don't you?" "Of course," he whispered, "and I meant it." The silence that followed was suffocating, like the air itself was holding its breath. Evelyn's eyes pinned him, a mix of adoration and something darker, something that made me want to bolt but kept me frozen, needing to hear what came next. "James," she said, her voice dripping with a sickening sweetness, "do you trust me with your life?" "Yes," he answered without a second's pause. "Then you're going to do something for me. Something hard, something that'll hurt, but it'll prove your love for me is bigger than anything else in this world." Dad swallowed hard, and I saw a flicker of doubt flash across his face, quick as a spark, before he pushed it away. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Evelyn's smile widened, a chilling glint of victory in her eyes, like she'd already won a game I didn't understand. "I want you to prove you love me more than you love your own daughter." Time stopped. The world went quiet. No crickets, no wind, just the thud of my own pulse. Dad froze, his head shaking slowly, like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. "Evelyn, I don't understand." "Oh, you understand," she said, her voice now cold and unyielding, the mask finally off. "I want you to sleep with Ellie. I want you to take her like she's your wife. Only then will I know you love me more than anything, more than your own morality." The silence that followed was the longest I'd ever felt. I stood there, glued to the door, my heart hammering so loud I thought it'd give me away. Dad didn't move, like he'd turned to stone. For a second I prayed he hadn't heard her right, but the look on his face told me he had. Shock, horror, disbelief. But worst of all, I saw something that scared me to my core. He was considering it. "Evelyn," he whispered, barely audible, "you can't be serious." She laughed, a soft, almost tender sound, like he'd told a cute little joke. "I've never been more serious in my life, James." He stood, pacing the tiny room, his hands shaking so bad he clasped them together to steady them. I'd never seen anyone so broken. "Evelyn, she's my daughter, my daughter. I'd never—" "You can," she cut in, her voice like steel. "And you will, if you love me." "This isn't love," he stammered, waving his hands, searching for words to name the horror of what she was asking. It's a crime, a sin. It's wrong. Everything about it is wrong." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her voice icy. "So you're saying your morals matter more than your love for me?" The question hit like a sledgehammer. Dad stopped pacing, his mouth open, speechless. "Is that what you're saying, James?" she pressed. "After 20 years, after I've given my life to you, through everything we've been through, you're going to refuse me because your precious principles mean more than I do?" "It's not about principles," he pleaded. It's about basic humanity. Ellie's my daughter, and you're my wife." "I am your wife," she shouted, her voice impossibly strong for someone so frail. "The woman you swore to love above all else. Remember our vows, James, in sickness and in health till death do us part." She paused, gasping for breath, then continued, her tone low and venomous. "Well, the sickness is here, the death is coming. And now's the time to prove if those vows were real or just words you mumbled in a church." Dad sank into the corner chair, burying his face in his hands, his sobs quiet but gut-wrenching. "Please," he choked out, "don't ask this of me. Anything else? Anything? You want me to sell everything? I'll do it. You want me to leave and never come back? I'm gone, just not this." Evelyn watched him cry, silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was so sweet it felt wrong, like sugar-coating poison. "James, my love, don't you see? I don't want you to leave. I want you by my side until my last breath. But I need to know your love is real, bigger than anything." She took a shaky breath, her eyes locked on his. "All my life, James, men have told me they loved me. Every single one failed when it came time to prove it. Family, reputation, faith, something always came first. But you promised I was everything, that you'd do anything for me. I believed you. I built my life on that promise." Dad looked up, his face red and swollen from tears. "And now," she continued, "it's time to keep that promise, to prove I'm more important than your daughter, your morals, anything." "Evelyn, please," he tried again, but she cut him off. "No, James, no more talking. Either you do this, or you admit you've been lying to me all along, that your love was never real, that I was never enough." Her voice cracked with effort. "And if you admit that, I'll die knowing I wasted my life on a man who never truly loved me." That night, the air in our house turned heavy, like a storm cloud ready to burst. Evelyn's words hung between us, a poison seeping into every corner of my soul. Dad sat there, silent, his head bowed as if he were fighting a war inside himself, his twisted love for her against the last scraps of goodness he had left. "She's just a girl," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "She's 17, James," Evelyn shot back, her voice smooth but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. "She's not a child anymore, and this isn't about her. It's about us, about you proving you love me." Dad's voice broke. "But how do I live with this after?" Evelyn's smile softened, almost tender, like she'd finally heard what she'd been fishing for. "After, my love, you'll live knowing you proved your love in the truest way. You'll know you chose me when it mattered most." She reached out her frail hand. "Come here, James." He hesitated, then shuffled to the bed, sitting on the edge and taking her hand like it was his lifeline. "I know it's hard," she whispered, squeezing his fingers. "True love always hurts, doesn't it? It demands sacrifice. But think of it this way. When I'm gone, you'll look at Ellie and remember me. She'll be the living proof of what you did for me." A tear slid down Dad's face as he closed his eyes. "When?" he asked, his voice barely a breath. "Now," Evelyn said, firm and unyielding. "Now, while I can still see you choose me over everything." Dad opened his eyes, and something in them had shattered, like a glass dropped on concrete. "Go get her," she ordered, her voice thick with triumph. That's when it hit me. I had to run, but my feet felt like they were cemented to the floor, paralysed by the horror unfolding before me. I heard Dad's footsteps coming closer, and only then did my body snap into motion. I bolted to my room, threw myself onto the bed, and pretended to sleep, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst. The door creaked open. Dad stood there, his silhouette dark against the faint moonlight. "Ellie," he called softly. I rolled over, rubbing my eyes like I'd just woken up. "Dad, what's wrong? What time is it?" He didn't answer, just stared at me, his face streaked with tears. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Your mum wants to see you." My legs shook as I got up, faking grogginess to hide the terror clawing at my chest. "Is she okay?" I asked, pouring every ounce of innocence I could muster into my voice. He didn't respond, just motioned for me to follow. Each step down the hall felt like walking toward a guillotine. Dad was different, hunched, hands trembling in his pockets, like a man carrying a mountain. At the bedroom door, he stopped, breathing hard, like he was about to dive into a frozen lake. Ellie, he said, not meeting my eyes, whatever happens now, you have to understand. I don't have a choice. Before I could ask what he meant, he opened the door and nudged me inside. Evelyn was awake, her green eyes glowing in the dim light like a cat's. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a mother's smile. It was the grin of a hunter who'd sprung her trap. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Come sit with me." I glanced at Dad, desperate for some hint he'd stop this, but he stared at the floor, hands still shaking. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Evelyn took my hand, her grip cold but strong. "Ellie, you know I'm dying soon." I nodded, my stomach twisting. "And you know how much I love your father." Another nod. "So you'll understand what I'm about to ask." Her words tightened around me like a noose. "I need you to do something important," she said, squeezing my hand harder. "Something to show your father how much I love him and how much he loves me. I want you to lie here with me and let him love you the way he loves me." For a moment, my brain refused to process it, like she'd spoken in riddles. Then the truth slammed into me and nausea hit so hard I nearly gagged. "What?" I whispered. "You heard me," she said, her grip tightening. "Your father's going to show me his love, and you're going to help him." I tried to pull away, but her strength was unnatural, like death itself was fueling her. "I don't understand," I lied, because I understood too well, and it was ripping me apart. "Oh, you understand," she said. "You're not a kid anymore, Ellie. You're 17, a woman now. You're going to use that to prove the love between your parents." I looked at Dad, begging with my eyes for him to stop this, to be the father I needed. But his face was a storm of despair, pain and, worst of all, resignation. He'd made his choice. "I'm sorry, Ellie," he murmured. "I can't lose her." My voice trembled. "Dad, this is wrong. We can't do this." Evelyn cut in, her tone sharp. "Enough talk, James. Are you going to do this, or are you going to let me die disappointed?" Dad closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them, the last flicker of the man I knew was gone. "Take off your clothes," he said, his voice breaking like he was in physical pain. "Dad, please," I begged, but Evelyn interrupted. "Do what he says, Ellie. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I tried to stand, to run, but her grip held me like a vice, her will stronger than her dying body should have allowed. "James," she said, her eyes never leaving mine, "help her." Dad moved toward me, slow, like a man walking to his own execution. His trembling hand reached out. "Please," I whispered, staring into his eyes. "Don't do this. I'm your daughter." For a second I thought he'd stop, that the father I loved would fight back. But then Evelyn's voice sliced through. "James, you promised. You swore you loved me more than anything." And that was it. The final wall inside him crumbled. His hand touched my arm, shaking as he whispered, "Forgive me," and started to lift my nightgown. What happened next? I can't put into words. Not because I've forgotten. Every second is burned into my memory, even now over 50 years later. But some things are too heavy for words. All I can say is Dad cried the whole time, sobbing, begging for forgiveness. He was hurting as much as I was, maybe more, carrying the weight of knowing he was destroying his own daughter to appease a dying woman. And Evelyn? She watched it all, those green eyes gleaming. Not with pleasure, but with the sick satisfaction of power. She'd bent a man to do the unthinkable, and in that moment she was the queen of her own twisted kingdom. Evelyn's victory was complete, her green eyes glowing with the triumph of someone who'd won a game no one else could play. As it unfolded, she whispered to Dad, her voice a twisted lullaby. Now I know you love me, James. This is what true love looks like. No other man would have done this." When it was over, Dad rolled away, curling into himself like a wounded dog, his sobs ripping from some deep, broken place. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my body no longer feeling like mine, like my soul had slipped away, leaving just a hollow shell. "There," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with a sick satisfaction. "Now I can die in peace." She turned to me, her gaze almost tender but laced with venom. "Thank you, Ellie. You've given me the greatest gift, a mother's certainty that she was truly loved." I tried to speak, but my voice was gone, buried under the weight of what had just happened. She looked at Dad, still sobbing, facing the wall. "James, my love, come here." He didn't move at first. "Come here, darling," she urged, softer. Slowly, like every step cost him a piece of his soul, he dragged himself to her. Evelyn touched his tear-streaked face. "Now I know," she whispered. "You love me more than anything, more than your daughter, your morals, even yourself." She kissed his forehead, a grotesque parody of tenderness. "I can die happy, James, knowing our love was real, absolute, bigger than everything." Dad couldn't stop crying, broken in a way no one should ever be. "Lie here with me," she said. "Stay until I fall asleep." He obeyed, as always, curling up beside her, holding her tight. They lay there, ignoring me, still on the bed, exposed, shattered, reduced to ashes. Evelyn closed her eyes, a satisfied smile on her lips, and soon she was asleep. I stayed frozen for a few minutes, unable to move, unable to process. Then, somehow, I forced myself up, grabbed my nightgown from the floor, and stumbled out. In the bathroom, I locked the door and vomited until my stomach was empty. Then I sank to the cold tile floor and cried until no tears were left. When I finally emerged, the house was silent, a heavy, haunted silence, like even the walls were stunned by what they'd seen. I crawled into my bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn, replaying every second, trying to grasp how my world had collapsed in one night. 3 days later, Evelyn died. It was a quiet March morning in 1970, the sun rising over Springvale, Kentucky, as if the world didn't care. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when Dad's scream shattered the stillness, calling her name in raw panic. I dropped the mug, ceramic shards scattering across the floor, and ran to their room. He was shaking her lifeless body, whispering her name, begging her to wake up. But Evelyn was gone. Her green eyes closed forever, a peaceful look on her face that made my blood boil. She'd gotten her proof, her cruel victory, and now she rested, leaving us to drown in the wreckage. Dad collapsed onto her, clutching her like he could pull her back with his love. His cries were guttural, like he might die right there on the bed that had ruined us. I stood in the doorway, feeling nothing. No sadness, no relief, just a hollow void where my heart used to be. It was like part of me had died with her. The funeral was small. Evelyn had never been loved in Springvale. Folks always sensed something off about her. A few neighbours showed up out of courtesy, along with Dad's old boss and a couple from church. It was a quiet, sombre affair, whispers floating among the mourners, their pitying glances burning into me. If they knew the truth, pity wouldn't be what they felt. Dad never left the coffin's side, holding her cold hand, murmuring to her like she could still hear. I caught fragments. "Forgive me, Evelyn. I loved you too much. I don't know how to live without you." At the burial, he nearly threw himself into the grave, screaming that they couldn't take her, that he should be buried with her. 2 men had to hold him back. When we got home, our life, or whatever was left of it, began. The house was a tomb, filled with a suffocating silence thick with guilt and shame. Dad and I were strangers under the same roof, unable to look at each other. He stopped working, spending his days in Evelyn's old rocking chair, staring at the wall, lost in thoughts I couldn't bear to imagine. Sometimes I'd hear him talking to her, like she was still there. Other times he'd cry silently, tears streaming as he rocked. I moved through the house like a ghost, cooking meals he barely touched, washing clothes, sweeping floors, all on autopilot. It was easier to pretend I was just a housekeeper than to face the truth. That broken man was my father. The first weeks were unbearable. Every night I'd hear him sobbing in their room, pleading, "Evelyn, help me. Tell me how to live without you." And every night I'd lie awake, that horrible night replaying in my head like a broken record. His hands, her eyes, the weight of it all crushing me. About a month after her death, Dad started drinking. Just a sip at first, to dull the pain, he'd say. But it grew until he was drinking from morning to night. The liquor changed him. The kind, broken man I'd known vanished, replaced by someone bitter and volatile, shouting over nothing, smashing whatever was in reach when the anger took over. But the worst wasn't the outbursts. It was how he looked at me. At first he couldn't meet my eyes, guilt forcing his gaze to the floor. But as the drinking worsened, his looks changed, carrying something dark that made my skin crawl, like he was reliving that night, and maybe even savouring it. One night, 3 months after the funeral, he came to my room. I was half asleep when the door creaked. His silhouette swayed in the doorway, reeking of whiskey and sweat. "Ellie," he slurred. I pretended to sleep, my heart racing. "I know you're awake," he said, sitting on my bed's edge. "I keep thinking about that night, the last night with her." My blood turned to ice. "How happy she was," he mumbled. "How she smiled, said she finally knew I loved her." His hand rested on my arm through the blanket, and I fought not to flinch. I keep wondering, if I did it again, would she feel it? Would she see from heaven that I still love her? I shot up, shoving his hand away. "Dad, you're drunk. Go to bed." His red, glassy eyes held mine, and for a terrifying moment I thought he'd try something. But he sighed, staggered to his feet, and left without another word. After that, I started locking my door every night. The months dragged on, each day harder than the last. Dad drank more, talked to himself more, his glances growing stranger, heavier, with something that made my stomach churn. I stopped eating right, my clothes hanging loose as I wasted away. Neighbours whispered I looked sick, but how could I tell them I was dying inside? That every night was a battle to stay safe in my own home, terrified he'd cross that line again. 6 months after Evelyn's death, Mrs. Carter, a kind neighbour who'd always checked on me, came by. Dad was out buying more whiskey when she sat me down, her eyes full of worry. "Ellie, you don't look okay. What's going on?" For a moment I wanted to spill everything, to let the truth pour out and shake Springvale to its core. But the words stuck in my throat. How do you explain something so monstrous? How do you make anyone believe it? "I'm just tired," I said. "Taking care of the house, looking after him, it's a lot." She studied me like she knew there was more but didn't push. Mrs. Carter's words lingered in my mind like a lifeline thrown to a drowning soul. "If you need anything, Ellie, you come to me." "Promise?" I nodded, but deep down I knew I couldn't ask for help. Some scars cut too deep for kind words or a warm cup of tea to fix. The house became a prison, its walls soaking up every ounce of pain, guilt and horror, then exhaling it back in a suffocating fog that choked us daily. Dad's drinking got worse. He'd mutter to himself, his eyes trailing me with that sickening look that made my skin crawl. I locked my bedroom door every night, pretending to sleep when I heard his footsteps, but each day felt like another piece of me was slipping away. By the time December 1970 rolled around, almost a year after Evelyn's death, I faced a brutal truth: stay in that house and die inside, or find a way out. The decision hit me one cold morning while I was making coffee. Dad stumbled into the kitchen, still drunk from the night before, his eyes heavy with that awful gaze. "Ellie," he slurred. "Today's been a year since your mum passed. I think she'd want a tribute." His words froze me, like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. I knew then. Stay one more day, and he'd try to relive that night. Without Evelyn's twisted test of love, it would just be what it was, a crime. "I need to go out," I said, more to myself than him. "What?" he mumbled, squinting. "I'm going to Mrs. Carter's to borrow something," I lied, bolting from the kitchen before he could stop me. In my room, I collapsed on the bed, tears streaming, not from sadness but from raw desperation. I was 18, penniless, with no clue about the world beyond Springvale. How could I escape and survive? Then a memory sparked, a conversation I'd overheard months earlier. Mrs. Carter had mentioned her niece working as a maid in Louisville for a kind family. That scrap of hope was all I needed. I stuffed a few clothes into a bag, grabbed the little cash I'd saved from selling embroidery behind Dad's back, and slipped out. When I got to Mrs. Carter's, she took one look at my face and yanked me inside, shutting the door fast. "Ellie, what's wrong?" For the first time in a year, I let some of the truth spill out. Not everything, because some things are too heavy to say, but enough. I told her Dad's drinking was out of control, that his looks scared me, that I didn't feel safe. She listened, her eyes soft with understanding, then wrapped me in a hug. "You can't live like this, sweetheart. You're young. You deserve a life, not to be stuck with a broken man who's lost his way." Mrs. Carter connected me with her niece in Louisville and gave me money for a bus ticket. When Dad came looking for me, she lied, saying I'd gone to visit a cousin in Lexington and would be back soon. I never went back. The bus ride to Louisville felt like a lifetime, not because of the miles, but because each one peeled away the broken girl I'd been. It was like I was being born again, leaving Springvale and that shattered version of myself behind. In Louisville, Mrs. Carter's niece, Sarah, took me to the big house in the Highlands where she worked. The owner, Mrs. Helen, a kind widow, saw my gaunt frame and haunted eyes and offered me a job on the spot. Those first months were rough. Nightmares woke me, replaying that awful night. Some days I couldn't eat, others I'd cry for no reason. Mrs. Helen noticed but never pried, just treated me with quiet kindness, letting me heal at my own pace. Slowly, I started to come back to life. The work, cleaning, cooking, keeping the house in order, gave me a routine, a sense of normalcy I hadn't felt in years. Mrs. Helen pushed me to study at night, helping me catch up on the schooling I'd missed. That's when I met Michael, a delivery guy for a local grocery store. He was hard-working, gentle, the opposite of everything I'd seen in my parents' twisted love. At first I was terrified of him, any man really. I dodged his attempts to talk to me, but he was patient, kind, showing me that not all men were like Dad, that not all love was poison. We married 3 years later in a small church ceremony in Louisville, with Mrs. Helen as my matron of honour. She'd become like a second mother. I didn't invite anyone from Springvale. That life was buried with Evelyn. Michael and I had 4 boys, each one raised with the love I'd been starved of. When they had kids of their own, I became the grandmother I'd always wished for. Warm, present, protective. Michael passed 8 years ago, quietly in his sleep from a heart attack. I cried, but it was grief born of love, not despair. What we had was real, built on respect, care and partnership, the way love should be. I never went back to Springvale, never heard from Dad. Sometimes I wonder if he's still alive, if he ever stopped drinking, if he grasped the horror of what he did. But those thoughts pass quickly. Some doors are meant to stay shut. Now, at 73, I see things clearer. Dad wasn't a monster, just a weak man drowned in an obsessive love. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it helps me understand. Evelyn, though, she was the poison. She knew exactly what she was doing, destroying us both to feed her need to be worshipped. Their love wasn't love. It was a tangled mess of obsession and control, dressed up as romance. Real love lifts you up, protects you. Theirs tore us down. Leaving that house broke the cycle. I chose to save myself, and that choice kept the pain from poisoning my kids and grandkids. They grew up in a home where love meant kindness, where no one had to prove themselves through suffering. I'm telling you this not to shock you, but to say this: if someone's hurting you in the name of love, you don't owe them your loyalty. I was 18, broke and scared, but I started over. You can too. My life after Springvale was beautiful, full of laughter, love, and moments that made my heart sing. My boys are good men, my grandkids my pride. I grew old knowing I made the right choice. Saving yourself can be the greatest act of love, not just for you, but for everyone who comes after. Life tests us, tries to snuff out the hope we're born with. When it feels like the darkness is winning, you've got a choice: let it consume you or become your own light. I chose light, and after all I've been through, I'm still shining. I could have carried that pain like a boulder in my chest forever, crushing me with every breath. But you know what happened when I left that house in Springvale. When I found the courage to start over, I learned pain can be forged into strength. Every tear I cried in Louisville, every nightmare that jolted me awake, every moment I nearly gave up, they were moulding me into a tougher woman, one who could spot real love when it finally came. And it did come, folks, in Michael, my kids, my grandkids, and now in all of you, sharing your own stories in the comments. True love always finds those brave enough to leave the fake stuff behind. Now, when I watch my grandkids playing in my backyard, laughing without a care, growing up in a family where love doesn't mean pain or proof, I know every second of suffering was worth it. I broke a chain, a cycle of hurt that could have poisoned generations. My boys never knew fear in their own home. My grandkids only know love that lifts them up, that protects, that helps them grow. That's my greatest win, my proudest moment. If you're out there staring at a screen, trapped in a situation where someone's hurting you in the name of love, listen close. You are stronger than you know. I was an 18-year-old girl, broke, scared, with no clue about the world, and I made it. You can too. There's a fire inside you that sparks when things get desperate, when it's fight or sink. Don't be afraid to walk away from people who should protect you, but don't. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saving yourself. Life's too precious to spend in a place where you can't shine. Everyone deserves a shot at happiness, at real love, at building a family, whether it's by blood or by heart. Look at me. From a broken, terrified girl with nothing, I became a woman with a full life, mother to 4 incredible boys, grandma to 7 grandkids who light up my world, and now your YouTube Grandma Rose, connecting with thousands of you beautiful souls. If I could do it, so can you. The difference between staying stuck and building a new life is one brave, sometimes painful choice. Never give up on yourself. Never accept that suffering is just how it is. It's not. Life can be beautiful, full of real love and moments worth fighting for. Every morning in my little Louisville house, when I hear the birds chirping, smell fresh coffee brewing, and read your sweet comments, I thank God for the courage to leave that cursed house. Without that choice, I wouldn't be here, sharing stories, being part of your lives. Well, my darlings, this was the hardest story I've ever told here on Grandma Rose's Tales. Reliving it hurt, but it was necessary because you're my family now, and real family shares even the deepest wounds. If my story touched you, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve real love. Sending a big kiss from Grandma Rose right to your heart.